Hi everyone, welcome to the channel After All That Years.
You know that feeling when something's off, but you can't quite name it? That's how it started for me. After 23 years of marriage, you'd think I'd know when my wife was lying. The house felt different those last few months. Not physically. Everything was in its place, the same worn couch we'd been meaning to replace, the kitchen table with the ring stain from where Diane always set her coffee mug. But there was this heaviness in the air, like before a thunderstorm. I'd come home from the shop, grease still under my fingernails, and find her already dressed for bed at 8 o'clock, scrolling through her phone with that little frown she got when she was concentrating. "Long day?" I'd ask, settling into my recliner with a grunt. My back wasn't what it used to be after 30 years of auto repair. She'd respond, not looking up. "Just tired." Looking back, I should have pressed. Should have asked why she was tired when her job at the insurance office was the same routine it had been for 15 years. But you get comfortable, don't you? You assume the person you've shared a bed with for over 2 decades will tell you if something's eating at them. The first real sign came on a Thursday in March. I remember because it was the day after my 57th birthday, and Diane had made my favorite chocolate cake. From scratch, the way she used to when we were newlyweds. She'd been almost giddy that evening, laughing at my terrible jokes, curling up next to me on the couch while we watched some cop show. It felt like old times. But the next morning, she was different again, distant. She stood at the bathroom mirror longer than usual, applying makeup with the kind of precision she usually reserved for church or dinner parties. When I asked if she had something special at work, she just shrugged. "New client presentation," she said, but her eyes didn't meet mine in the mirror. That night, she didn't come home until nearly 10. I'd kept her dinner warm in the oven. Meatloaf, the kind she used to say, reminded her of her mother's cooking. When she finally walked through the door, she looked. I don't know how to describe it. Glowing, maybe, like she'd been laughing hard or running or doing something that made her feel alive. "How'd the presentation go?" I asked, getting up to fix her a plate. "Fine," she said, already heading toward the stairs. I'm exhausted, going to shower and head to bed. I stood there in the kitchen, holding her dinner, listening to the water run upstairs. The meatloaf was dry by then, overcooked from sitting in the oven too long. I scraped it into the garbage and told myself I was being paranoid. But paranoia has a way of growing, doesn't it? Especially when you keep feeding it little details that don't quite add up. Like the way she started taking her phone everywhere. To the bathroom, to the laundry room, even to get the mail. She'd always been casual about it before, leaving it on the counter while she cooked or forgetting it in her purse for hours. Now it was like an extension of her hand, and she kept it face down wherever she set it. Or the way she suddenly cared about her appearance again. Not that Diane had ever let herself go. She was still the pretty blonde I'd married, even if her hair came from a bottle now, and she complained about crow's feet I couldn't even see. But she started buying new clothes, things that were more, I don't know, younger. A red dress that hugged her curves, boots with heels higher than anything she'd worn in years. When I complimented her on them, she'd just smile and say she was trying to update her look. For who? I wanted to ask, but didn't. Because part of me was afraid of the answer. The late nights became more frequent. Client dinners, she said. Insurance conferences that ran long. A co-worker's birthday party that she couldn't skip. Always something that sounded reasonable until you added them all up and realized your wife was spending more time away from home than in it. I started paying attention to things I'd never noticed before. The way she hummed in the shower on certain mornings. How she'd check her phone and get that little smile, the one I used to think was for me. The fact that she'd stopped talking about her day in any real detail, giving me the bare minimum when I asked how things went. "Work's work," became her standard response, followed by a quick change of subject. One evening in April, I remember because the daffodils Diane had planted years ago were just starting to bloom. I decided to surprise her at the office. She'd been putting in so much overtime lately, and I thought maybe I could take her out for dinner. Just the two of us. We hadn't done that in months. But when I got to the building, her car wasn't in the parking lot. The security guard, Frank, nice guy, I'd chatted with him before when picking Diane up for appointments, told me she'd left around 4. Said she had somewhere to be, he mentioned, not thinking anything of it. I sat in my truck for a while, staring at the empty parking space where her Honda should have been. It was a 6:30. She told me she'd be working until at least 8. I called her phone, and it went straight to voicemail. Her voice, bright and professional. "Hi, you've reached Diane. Please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible." I didn't leave a message. When she got home that night, almost 10 again, she looked surprised to see me waiting up. "You're still awake," she said, stating the obvious. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I might surprise you at work. Take you to dinner." Something flickered across her face. Fear? Guilt? It was gone too quickly to tell. "Oh, that would have been nice. I had to run some errands after work. You know how it is." I nodded, but my stomach was churning. What kind of errands? Just stuff. Grocery store was a madhouse. Took forever. But I'd check the kitchen when I got home. No new groceries anywhere. That night, lying next to her in bed, I listened to her breathing and tried to remember the last time we'd really talked. Not about bills or schedules or whose turn it was to call the plumber, but actually talked. About dreams, fears, things that mattered. I couldn't remember. I thought about our early years, when we'd stay up until 2 in the morning just talking about everything and nothing. She'd tell me about the book she was reading or some funny story from work, and I'd share whatever ridiculous thing had happened at the shop. We'd make love slowly, lazily, like we had all the time in the world. When had we stopped doing that? The next morning I tried, really tried. "Diane," I said over coffee, "I feel like we haven't talked in ages, really talked. Maybe we could go away for a weekend. That bed and breakfast up in the mountains you used to love." She looked at me over her mug, the blue ceramic one with the chip on the handle that she refused to throw away because it was from our honeymoon. And for a second, I thought I saw the woman I'd married. Soft, open, ready to say yes to adventure. But then her phone buzzed, and whatever I'd seen disappeared. She glanced at the screen, and that little smile appeared again. "Maybe," she said, not looking at me. "Things are just really busy right now. Rain check." Rain check. Like our marriage was something that could be postponed until the weather cleared. I started doing things I'm not proud of. Checking the mileage on her car when she came home from those long days at work. Looking at our phone bill to see what numbers she was calling. I found one that appeared constantly, dozens of times a week, sometimes in the middle of the night. When I called it, a man's voice answered. "Hello?" I hung up. The name on the bill was Kevin Martinez. I didn't know any Kevin Martinez, and when I casually asked Diane if she did, she said no without hesitation. Another lie to add to the growing collection. I could have confronted her then. Should have. But something held me back. Maybe it was cowardice, or maybe it was hope. As long as I didn't know for certain, there was still a chance I was wrong. As long as we were still sleeping in the same bed, eating breakfast at the same table. There was still a chance we could fix whatever was broken. But denial only lasts so long. It was a Friday night in early May when everything came crashing down. Diane had said she was working late again. Some quarterly report that needed to be finished. I'd made dinner for myself, watched the news, and was getting ready for bed when I realized she'd forgotten her reading glasses on the nightstand. She was always complaining about how she couldn't see anything without them, and I knew she'd need them for all that paperwork, so I drove to her office building, planning to leave them with the night security guard. But when I got there, the parking lot was empty except for Frank's car. Through the windows, I could see most of the office floors were dark, Frank looked surprised to see me. "Evening, Joe. You looking for your wife? She left hours ago." "What time was that?" I asked, my mouth going dry. "Oh, around 3, I'd say. Maybe earlier. Said she had a good weekend planned." I thanked him and walked back to my truck on unsteady legs. It was almost 11 o'clock. If she'd left work at 3, where had she been for 8 hours? I drove around for a while, not really looking for her, but not ready to go home either. I ended up at the 24-hour diner where we used to go after late movies when we were dating. I ordered coffee I didn't want and tried to make sense of what was happening to my life. The waitress, young girl, maybe 25, kept refilling my cup and giving me concerned looks. Finally, she asked if I was okay. "My wife's cheating on me," I said, and hearing the words out loud made them real in a way they hadn't been before. The girl's face softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry," she said. "That sucks." It did suck. It sucked in ways I couldn't have imagined. I got home around 1 in the morning to find Diane's car in the driveway. She was already in bed, apparently asleep, though she'd left the bathroom light on. Her clothes were scattered on the floor, not like her usual neat habits, and I could smell perfume. Not the light floral scent she usually wore, but something heavier, muskier. I stood there looking at her for a long time. Even in sleep, she looked different. Younger somehow. Satisfied. Like whatever she'd been doing had filled some hole in her that I hadn't even known existed. I slept on the couch that night, telling myself it was because I didn't want to wake her. But really, I couldn't stand the thought of lying next to her, pretending everything was normal when my world was falling apart. The confrontation came the next morning. I'd been awake since 5, sitting at the kitchen table with cold coffee, rehearsing what I'd say. When Diane finally came downstairs around 9, she was already dressed and made up. Her purse slung over her shoulder. "I'm meeting Janet for shopping," she announced, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "Probably be gone most of the day." "Is that what you're calling it now?" I asked. She froze, apple halfway to her mouth. "What?" "Shopping. Is that what you call it when you spend 8 hours with Kevin Martinez?" The apple fell from her hand and rolled across the floor. For a moment, we just stared at each other across our kitchen, the kitchen where she'd taught me to make her grandmother's pasta sauce, where we'd fed our baby nephew when my sister visited, where we'd planned our future over countless meals. "How do you know that name?" she whispered. "Phone bill," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "Funny thing, though, when I asked you about him last month, you said you didn't know any Kevin, but you talk to him more than you talk to me these days." She sank into the chair across from me, all the color drained from her face. For a second, I thought she might deny it, come up with another lie to add to the pile. But instead, she covered her face with her hands and started crying. "Joe," she said through her fingers, "I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen." And there it was, the truth I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. "How long?" I asked. 4 months, she said without looking up. "Maybe 5. I don't know anymore." 5 months. While I'd been worrying about her working too hard, she'd been building a whole other life with someone else. "Who is he?" "A client," she said, her voice barely audible. "He came in about a claim and we started talking. He was funny and charming, and he made me feel." "What? What did he make you feel that I don't?" She finally looked at me then, her eyes red and swollen. "Young," she said. "He made me feel young again, like I was still someone worth pursuing, worth exciting." "When was the last time you looked at me like that, Joe? Really looked at me?" I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but the words stuck in my throat. Because if I was honest, really honest, I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her as anything other than my wife. Not Diane the woman, with her own dreams and desires and fears, but just my wife. The person who was supposed to be there, who folded my laundry and knew how I liked my eggs. So this is my fault? I asked. No, she said quickly. No, Joe, that's not what I'm saying. This is on me. I made these choices. But we've been like roommates for years, going through the motions. Don't you feel it too? I did feel it. That was the worst part. Somewhere along the way, we'd stopped being lovers and become business partners, managing the day-to-day operations of our shared life without any real joy or passion. Do you love him? I asked, dreading the answer. She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. Then, softly, I think so. Those 3 words hit me like a physical blow. I think so. Not even a definitive yes, but enough to destroy everything we'd built together. What do you want to do? I asked. I don't know, she said, and I believed her. I know I've hurt you, and I know there's probably no coming back from this. But Joe, I'm not happy. I haven't been happy for a long time, and neither have you. We both know it. She was right, and that made it worse. We'd been sleepwalking through our marriage for years, 2 people sharing a house but not really sharing a life. But I'd thought that was normal, the way long marriages evolved. I'd thought we were comfortable. I need you to leave, I said finally. What? I need you to pack some things and go stay with your sister or wherever. I need space to think, and I can't do that with you here. She started crying again, harder this time. Joe, please. Can't we try to work this out? I'll end it with Kevin. I'll do anything. Would you? Would you really end it with him if I asked? She hesitated just long enough to give me my answer. Get out, I said, standing up from the table. Take whatever you need for a few days and get out of my house. An hour later, I watched her drive away with 2 suitcases in her backseat. She'd cried as she packed, kept apologizing, kept saying she never meant for it to happen this way. But she was also moving with purpose, like part of her was relieved to finally stop pretending. The silence she left behind was deafening. I walked through our house, my house now I supposed, seeing everything differently. The wedding photos on the mantel looked like pictures of strangers. The bed we'd shared felt enormous and cold. Even the kitchen, where we'd had our final conversation, felt foreign. I called my brother Eddie that night, the first person I'd told about any of this. Jesus, Joe, he said, after I'd explained everything. I'm sorry, man. That's rough. Did you see it coming? I asked. Was I the only one who didn't know? Eddie was quiet for a moment. There were signs, he admitted. Last few family gatherings, she seemed. Different. Distracted. But I figured you guys were just going through a rough patch. All couples do. But this wasn't a rough patch. This was an ending. Diane called me the next day, then the day after that. I let them go to voicemail. She left long, rambling messages about how sorry she was, how confused she felt, how she wanted to fix things. But mixed in with the apologies were explanations that sounded more like justifications. How lonely she'd been. How Kevin understood her in ways I never had. How she tried to deny her feelings but couldn't. On the 4th day, the messages stopped. On the 6th day, I got a text. Kevin wants to talk to you. I stared at that message for a long time. What could this man possibly have to say to me? What could the person who'd helped destroy my marriage want to discuss? But curiosity won out over pride. I texted back, where? An hour later, I was sitting across from Kevin Martinez in a coffee shop downtown, studying the man who'd stolen my wife. He was younger than me, probably mid-40s, with the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having to doubt yourself. Good-looking in a conventional way, well-dressed, the type of guy who probably played golf on weekends and drove a car nicer than mine. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice carrying just a hint of nervousness. I know this is awkward. Awkward doesn't begin to cover it, I replied. He nodded, stirring his coffee unnecessarily. Look, I want you to know that I never intended for any of this to happen. When I met Diane, she told me she was unhappy, said she was thinking about leaving you. I thought she was already done with the marriage. And that made it okay. No, he said quickly. No, it didn't make it okay. I was selfish. I saw this amazing woman who seemed interested in me, and I didn't ask the hard questions I should have asked. Amazing woman. He called my wife an amazing woman, and I felt a stab of something that might have been jealousy. When was the last time I'd thought of Diane that way? She told me yesterday that she wants to try to work things out with you, Kevin continued. And I told her that's what she should do. Joe, I may have feelings for your wife, but I'm not interested in being the reason someone's marriage falls apart. That's not who I want to be. I studied his face, looking for signs that he was lying, but he seemed genuine, regretful even. So you're ending it? I already have. I told Diane that whatever this was between us, it needs to stop. She has a history with you, a life, 23 years. I can't compete with that, and I don't want to try. We sat in silence for a few minutes, two men who'd found themselves on opposite sides of a situation neither of us had planned. She really does love you, Kevin said finally. She talks about you all the time, about your early years together, the things you built. I think she got lost somewhere along the way, but the foundation is still there. Wow, I wanted to hate this man, but I found I couldn't. He seemed as confused and conflicted as I felt. What am I supposed to do with that? I asked. I don't know, he said honestly. But I wanted you to hear it from me that it's over between us. Whatever you two decide to do from here, it'll be just between you two. When I got home that evening, Diane's car was in the driveway. She was sitting on the front porch steps, still in her work clothes, looking small and uncertain. Hi, she said as I approached. Hi. Kevin said he talked to you. He did. She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself despite the warm evening. Can we talk? Really talk this time? I sat down beside her on the steps, careful to leave space between us. The street was quiet. Our neighbors probably inside making dinner or helping kids with homework. All the normal activities of normal marriages. I don't know where to start, Diane said. Start with the truth, all of it this time. So she did. She told me about the first time Kevin had asked her to coffee, how flattered she'd been that someone found her interesting, about the guilt she'd felt, but also the excitement of feeling desired again, about how I'd seemed more interested in my crossword puzzle than in anything she had to say. I'm not blaming you, she said quickly when she saw my expression. I'm just trying to explain how I got here, how we got here. She was right about the crossword puzzles, and the way I'd stopped really listening when she talked about her day, giving automatic responses while my mind was somewhere else. When had I become that husband, the one who took his wife for granted? I've been thinking, I said, about what Kevin said, about you wanting to work things out. I do, she said, turning to look at me directly. Joe, I know I've broken your trust, and I know it might be impossible to fix, but I want to try. I want to remember why we fell in love in the first place. Do you remember? I asked. A small smile crossed her face. You had grease under your fingernails when you asked me out. I thought it was the sexiest thing I'd ever seen. This man who worked with his hands, who could fix anything. And you were so nervous, stumbling over your words like you couldn't believe someone like me would say yes. I remembered that too. She'd been working at the bank then, all professional in her skirt suit, but she'd had this laugh that lit up the whole room. I'd been smitten from the moment I heard it. When did we stop laughing together? I asked. I don't know. Somewhere between the mortgage payments and the routine oil changes and just life, I guess. We talked until it got dark, sitting on those porch steps like teenagers. Not about Kevin, or the affair, or the lies, but about us. about the dreams we'd had when we were young, the places we'd wanted to travel, the things that used to matter to us before we got so caught up in just surviving day to day. I want to try too, I said finally. But Diane, if we do this, it has to be all in. No more lies, no more secrets, and no more Kevin, ever. Can you do that? Yes, she said without hesitation. I already have. It's over, Joe. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake, but it's over. It wasn't easy. God knows it wasn't easy. There were days in the months that followed when I'd catch her looking at her phone and wonder who she was thinking about. Nights when I'd lie awake, wondering if she was really asleep beside me or just pretending. Times when the hurt would hit me like a wave and I'd have to leave the room to keep from saying something I'd regret. But there were good days too. Days when we'd catch each other's eyes over coffee and smile for no reason. When she'd laugh at one of my stupid jokes, really laugh, not just be polite. When we'd hold hands watching TV like we used to when we were dating. We went to counseling. Diane's idea, and I wasn't thrilled about it, but I went. Sat in some therapist's office talking about feelings and communication and all that stuff that made me uncomfortable. But it helped, having someone neutral to guide us through the mess we'd made. Marriage isn't a destination, the therapist told us during one session. It's a journey. And sometimes you take wrong turns or get lost, but that doesn't mean you can't find your way back to the right path. 6 months after that awful morning in our kitchen, Diane and I took a weekend trip to the mountains. The bed and breakfast she used to love, the one I'd suggested before everything fell apart. We walked along hiking trails, talked about everything and nothing, made love for the first time since I'd learned about Kevin. It was different than it used to be. There was a fragility to it, a consciousness that what we had wasn't guaranteed, that it required tending and attention and care. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe taking each other for granted had been part of the problem. "Do you forgive me?" Diane asked one morning as we sat on the bed and breakfast's porch, watching the sunrise over the mountains. "I'm working on it," I said honestly. "Some days are better than others." She nodded, accepting that. "I forgive you too," she said. "For what?" "For letting us drift apart. For stopping seeing me as a woman instead of just your wife. For not fighting for us when you felt us slipping away." It took me a minute to realize she was right. I had things to be forgiven for too. Maybe I hadn't cheated, but I'd checked out in my own way. Let our marriage become something we endured instead of something we enjoyed. "We both screwed up," I said. "Yeah, we did. But we're here now." That was 2 years ago. Diane and I are still together, still married, still working on it every day. It's not the same marriage we had before. It couldn't be. But in some ways, it's better. We talk more now. Really talk. We make effort with each other. Plan date nights. Remember to say thank you for small kindnesses. The trust is still rebuilding. Probably always will be, to some extent. But we're committed to the work. Both of us. Because we learned something important in almost losing each other. That love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day. And when you stop choosing it, stop nurturing it, it withers away without you even noticing. I still think about Kevin Martinez sometimes. Wonder if he found someone else, someone available. I hope he did. Not because I've forgiven him completely, but because I understand now that he was just a symptom, not the disease. The disease was the way Diane and I had stopped seeing each other, stopped trying. My marriage isn't perfect, neither am I, and neither is Diane. But it's ours, and it's worth fighting for. It took almost losing it to remember that. People sometimes ask me if I really forgave her, if I really got over the affair. The honest answer is that some days I have, and some days I haven't. But forgiveness isn't a destination either. It's a journey too. And I'm still walking it, one step at a time, hand in hand with the woman I chose to love 25 years ago, and choose to love still today. The best marriages, I've learned, aren't the ones that never face problems. They're the ones where two people decide that what they have together is worth more than whatever tried to tear them apart. Diane and I decided that what we had was worth fighting for. And you know what? We were right.